everyone. I'm back, Chelsea Olamiller, with my series Grief and Goodbyes. And tonight I have another guest from Canada. I'm so excited. We've been having the Canada representation in full effect the last month. And my guest tonight is super special. Her name is Corey Sirota, and she is a grief, loss, and bereavement specialist. She's an author. She is a host of a radio show. And she has an awesome TED Talk that if you have not heard yet, I will put the link in the comments when this is all over because you have to check it out. So I would love to welcome Corey.
Thank you so much for having me, Chelsea.
Yes, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your work with my followers. I want to remind everybody that tonight, as I'm speaking with Corey, about her book, about her work, and just about her grief journey. If you have any comments for her, like I said, she is a grief, loss, and bereavement specialist. So if you have anything that you want to ask her, if you have anything that you want us to talk about, make sure you put it in the comments section. We will try to hit on that. I know Carolyn sent in a comment and a question, so we're going to get to that tonight. But if anybody else has anything, make sure you let us know. And then, as always, at the end, I will put how to purchase Corey's book, how to get her website, how to get any kind of work that she does, because she wears many hats. It'll all be in the comment section tonight. So welcome to everybody that is here. And Corey, why don't you start? I know your story. I've read your book, but for those people that are tuning in right now that don't know your story, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you got into the grief space?
With pleasure. It's something I often say to is like, what's a nice girl like me doing in a profession like this?
Exactly.
And my standard line is that I didn't find it, it found me. And that's because not only did I study academically, but personally, when I was 24, my brother, Andy, my older brother, was hit by a car. He was on the sidewalk. It was during a police chase, and the car went onto the sidewalk to avoid the police, and he was hit and killed on impact. And while I was already a social worker, my life changed completely at that moment for myself, for my family. He was my only sibling, so I became an only child. And all the work I did all this nice community service work as a social worker. I realized there wasn't enough services available for people who were grieving. So that began my path to start to work and support grieving people. So when I help people, I tell them the story because I want them to understand that I'm not just talking about something academically. It's also something that I was touched with, and my family was touched with personally, and it makes it, I think, more credible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think you touch on it very well, especially in your book, which I want to talk about, which was someone died. Now what? And I read this book in just days. Corey said it to me, and I really just read through it. And one thing that I found is that not only do you have the professional background, but you have that personal connection. And so your book and your experience are both, it's very practical, but it's also very heartfelt because you have journeyed through that. And so it's just, it's kind of like a teacher who has kids, and a teacher who doesn't have kids, both love what they're doing and are absolutely qualified to do the job, but it's just a little bit different heart and experience. And so I really felt that through your book and through the work that I've seen.
Thank you. I have gotten comments about it around that it's not self-serving, it's not self-absorbed, but it's just enough to help people feel and connect, which is so important when it comes to a topic like this, because as you well know, as probably everyone listening to this podcast knows, we live in a society that does not want to talk about grief and loss. We are a death-denying society. We don't use the words. We don't say, we use all these euphemisms because it makes us uncomfortable. And I hope with the work I'm doing and the work you're doing, we can help destigmatize and support people through what is a natural life cycle process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great thing to kind of go into next, because in your book, you do talk about, how we're, as a society and just as even grieving individuals, we often say, my mother passed, or my mother's gone, or my mother's no longer with us. And you talk about the importance of using words like death, dying, died, and really just the truthful, factual adjectives and words that describe that. And I will say that it took me aback a little bit because I was like, I hate using those words. And I
Mhm.
feel like this is why. I feel like they're harsh.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know that sounds so silly,
That's
but
that's what it
when
is.
I'm like, my mom died,
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, even though that's the reality, so
Nothing.
how do you get past that, I guess? Like what
I
do
will
you
even have people look in the mirror and say it in practice when I work with clients, when I work with training professionals. I say, look in the mirror and get used to it saying it, because otherwise it's the elephant in the room. And the
yeah.
fact that we use all these euphemisms, and my favorite, by the way, is expired, as if someone could be considered
Oh my gosh.
like really?
Yeah.
But we use them because we are uncomfortable. If we started to use the words, they wouldn't seem so bizarre. We use when someone's born, we announce in the in the birth section, we say, thrilled to announce the birth of. Okay. But in the death section, I challenge anyone to go to an obituary section. I do this when I do presentations, and I circle, my kids know this already. I circle the amount of times the word someone died is written. And maybe there's 2 out of 20, if that. Why? Well, you can tell me that's redundant. The fact is, of course, it's the obituary section, but we say someone's born on. The fact that we don't even use the words in the obituary section is why we're so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Catch 22.
Yeah. Well, and I will even tell you, like, so one of my writer friends who writes about grief,
Mhm.
she wrote a really vulnerable piece. And usually she says like my mother passed or whatever. And in this piece, she said, my mother died. My mother is dead. And somebody reached out to her, and I remember her being upset, and she said, this woman reached out to me and said, can you please change this? It's too harsh. Like I can't read it. It sounds very insensitive. That's what she
Right.
said. She said, it sounds too insensitive. Can you change this? And I remember my friend being like, I can't change it because one, that's just what flowed out of me today. And the fact remains my mother is dead. And so I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just trying to tell you where I am today. And so when I read this piece of your book, I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what my friend had went through. A woman literally said to her, change this. It's
Yeah.
insensitive. But the fact is, at the base of those words, they're not insensitive. They are just matter of fact.
It's reality.
Yeah.
No different than somebody being born or the birth of.
Yes. That was something that really struck me in the book was just, it's such a simple thing. It seems like it's such a simple thing. And the way you describe it in the book and the way you work through it really had me doing my own kind of workshop of okay, let me get used to this because that's essentially, the truth of what it is. So yeah. So if you don't mind, Corey, can we answer can we go to Carolyn's question since she's the very first one?
Yes.
And first I also want to say, hey Pat and hey Carrie Ann. I hope I'm saying your guys. Hi Sue. Sue wrote a question in there and we'll get to that in a second. But Carolyn wrote and she said, how do we pick up the pieces and try to create normalcy when all seems gone and relationships are fractured? So what would you say to that?
How much time do
I
I
know
get?
that's a really difficult question, but I wanted to make
It's
sure
an
we get
honest
it.
and a real heartfelt question, so I appreciate asking it. And I think one of the biggest challenges I face as a grief counselor is what I hear is people saying, "I just want to feel normal again," and everybody's looking for that normal. And I know that with the pandemic, we started to use the term that I have been used for a long time, which is nothing is going to be normal again. Or no, I shouldn't say nothing, but the person you were and the person you are after somebody you love dies is different. And I feel so badly when I say that because I know that again, is it harsh? Is it too much? But honestly, if you are struggling with that experience, aren't you feeling that? Isn't that the truth? There's no one that's ever said to me, no, well, that's not really it. That's what's happened. And knowing that and acknowledging that it doesn't mean that your life is going to be gloom and doom. But what the challenge is how do you find that normal? Well, you're not going back.
Yep.
There's pieces of you that you can bring forward, absolutely, and I hope that most people will, and it doesn't happen overnight. Grief is not an event, it's a process. So and it has roller coaster ups and downs, peaks and valleys, difficult times, more manageable times. So it's going into the process, understanding that this is going to be different. It's going to feel uncomfortable.
Mm.
It's going to have come with tears and pain and difficult times. But when we spend our time trying to be who we were, we're not going to find that. And that's what I mean, it's another discussion, but we're not, it's called all the secondary losses, the loss of self, sense of self, the loss of the relationship, the loss of role in a family. There's so many other losses that we don't talk about. We just focus on what I would say. I don't want to say the primary loss. So we don't recognize or understand that those pieces also come with the death of someone special in your life. And so is that a great answer? I don't know. I just want to recognize and hope that you can recognize that it doesn't mean that the rest of your life is gloom and doom, but it's finding and creating new normals. And I hope that with that, maybe our perspective changes and we understand maybe a little more of what's important, and we don't take things for granted. And that becomes, there are some beautiful things that can come with great love. There's great pain. That's why with great love, there's great grief. It comes hand in hand. So we're going to have those difficult times. Expect that they're coming. Those are normal, but also that you're creating a new normal.
Yes, absolutely. And I always hate it when people say, how can I get back to normal, or what, and I'm always like, what is normal? I can't tell
That's right.
you, but I can tell you what's common in grief. I can tell you what's common in my experience, but normal, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know on my best day if I had normal,
That's right.
and I love you said it tonight, and you say it in your book, but grief is not an event, it's a process. And I hope if everybody takes away one thing, write that down on a post-it and stick it by yourself so that you can remind yourself grief is not an event. It is a process. It is an ongoing process that you're going to have and keep and hold forever. But like Corey explained, it's just going to shift, and some days be easier to carry and some days be unbearable,
Right.
And so I absolutely love that. And I highlighted that in your book several times because it's such a good, sentence, grief is not an event. Because, a lot of times, and I think society, and you can tell me if you agree, but has told us that maybe not that it's an event, but that it's something that should be gone.
Get over it, right?
Get over it. Aren't you over that already?
You hear that. Why are you still wallowing? Or you're still
Yes.
like that? It's been so it's been X amount of time. And I say X amount of time because I'd like to know, please tell me, how long is it? How long are we actually supposed to? Is it what is okay? You can be a month, 2 months, 6 months. Like, what's the okay time? Because I will say there's no okay time. And so not to put that pressure on yourself that
Yes.
society will say. I've talked about it in a TED talk that I did. I had a client that said to me, so what's wrong with me? It's been 6 months and I'm still crying. And I was like, well, whoa, first of all, what's wrong with crying? You love them, you cry. That's a sign of pain. And I know that we don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. So what's the first thing we do when we start crying? We apologize because, of course, we don't want to make anyone else feel uncomfortable. Well, I look at people and I say, weren't they worth crying over?
Oh,
Which gets them.
whoa, weren't they worth crying over?
And then, who's saying what's wrong with you? Why are you still crying? And what was sort of their messages growing up? Because that has a lot to do with it. That's my whole SCARS acronym. That has a lot to do with it, because that if the message is that you're supposed to suck it up and not cry after 3 months, 6 months, a year, then you feel like you're doing something wrong. And so perhaps we can look at somebody who judges us and says, what's wrong with you? Why are you still crying? And say, hey, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you? One of my favorite lines that I have been using and suggesting, because I won't tell anybody what to do, I will just suggest, when somebody else talks to you about your grief, you smile and you look at them. You might want to thank them and you say, that's just not how it works for me.
Yes, that is just not how it works for me. Absolutely.
And if you really want to add something, a little sort of cherry on the top of that, you say, consider yourself fortunate that you don't understand.
Yes. I've seen that many times, if you, and that's another thing I always try to tell people too, when they say comments to me, like, people that have not grieved a significant loss, they can't understand.
Yeah.
And there's two parts to that. One, you wouldn't want them to.
No,
They're
no.
going to eventually, but you wouldn't want them to.
Yeah.
But they mean well. They
Yes.
truly
Oh,
mean well. But unless you know it, I mean, think to your life before you had significant losses and
mhm.
the funerals that you went to and the showings and all of these things that you went to. I was a different person. I said those things probably. I did those things and because I thought that's what you did. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, why
Yeah.
did I do that?
Right, you're like, "Oh my god. Did
Yes.
it come out of my mouth?" Yeah.
Yeah. So what in just in continuing that, what do you find is some of the I know just being there for someone that's
Right.
grieving, but
Yeah.
what do you find are the most helpful things? If somebody has to say something,
Okay.
what's the most helpful?
So it's I I do agree with what you're saying, and I say it's the umbrella of care. So the intention is not to be hurtful. The intention is to be supportive. And there's a big difference though between what the intention is and what the impact of it is. And we think we have to remember that even if our intention is not to be hurtful, there the impact can be. So
Right.
in knowing that, I don't know that there's wonderful I wish there were wonderful, picture perfect, great statements. I think it's a lot more about what you don't say. So
Mhm.
what you wanna stay away from, of course, is trying to fix it. We desperately wanna make someone feel better, and I can tell you, working in the field a long time, I know that I can't fix it, and I can't make them better. I can accompany them through the process and sit in what I'll call that dark hole or that dark place until they're ready to get up and to move a little bit forward. But I'm not going to try and minimize their grief by saying, well, at least they lived till na na na. At least you got to anything that starts off, at least please take it off your
Yes.
stop saying it. Just don't say it. Please,
Yep.
please, please. I
Yep.
beg of you, do not say it. You can just say, I'm sorry for your loss and not call me if you need anything because they're not calling.
Right.
Nobody.
Nobody
So
calls. Yes.
you need a carpool? Do you need some groceries? Do you need me to pick up something? Be concrete because I believe people want to help. They do. They
Yep.
genuinely do, but they might not know how. So, but the more specific you are, it's easy for someone who's grieving to be able to say, "Yeah, that would be helpful," or "No, I don't need that." But if you're just call me if you need anything, most people, most grievers won't call.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all of a sudden, all these comments came through. So let me look because I think we're getting some questions. So awesome. So Maggie says, is there some advice that you can give someone who is grieving multiple people?
Yes.
So how would you handle that? So if you're, she said her husband passed away, her brother, I see, I did it. I said passed away instead of
Yeah,
died. See,
it's
I'm doing it.
normal,
Yeah,
and
she
I will never correct someone by
and she even wrote died and I said it, but so this is me. This is me,
yeah.
the empath trying to but she said her husband died in 2016, her brother and mother died 4 months apart in 2019. So how would you help someone with multiple losses?
First of all, Maggie, I'm so sorry. My condolences on that. That's huge,
Yes.
and I mean, one loss is big, so multiple losses are very difficult and a lot. I will say that we need to grieve each loss separately. So you need to give each loss its loss, death, its time.
Yeah.
And process each one, not all of them at once. Because what happens is typically we have a loss, and then and we don't deal with it, and then another one, and another one, and another one, and then one point it's got to go somewhere. We don't even know. It gets all confused about who are we grieving, how are we grieving. So if you can get whether it's a support group or a grief counselor that can help you process each loss and how you feel about each person that died because you have different relationships with people and you're going to have different reactions. But I worked in a funeral home for 5 years helping families when there had been a death, and I would see a family, and let's say it was a parent that had died, and it could have been an older parent, and it's an adult that maybe is even in their 60s, and I'd hear about the sibling or the miscarriage that they had because they'd never had anybody allow them to process it. So it's they stay there. So I really do think that it would be helpful for you to take the time to, whether it's even with yourself journaling, process each the meaning of each death separately,
Yeah.
because otherwise they get all, I guess, confused and meld together.
Yeah. So let me, before I ask you the next question, which comes from Carrie, um, and I'll get to the other ones too, but do you see clients, like if anybody is here that needs a grief counselor, can you see people in the States or,
I have to check the HIPAA rules.
yeah, I don't know how that
So
works. Okay.
I can see clients, but I have to make sure it depends on the state they live in.
Okay.
In some states, you have to be licensed in that state, and others not. So it depends on where you live.
Okay, yeah. So if anybody is wanting some individual services with Corey, just comment on here and she can get to that later and you guys can check that out. And if not, I'm happy to provide a list of
Yeah,
places and websites that would offer those
right.
services. And then, so Carrie is asking about the jealousy of grief. And she said, is it okay to be jealous of people who have both parents? Or, and I know I've written on this a lot. Jealousy was something I was super ashamed and embarrassed of. But that first Mother's Day after my mother passed, I was so jealous. And
Mhm.
I always tell people, I'm not jealous because I want you not to have it. I just want to have it too. And I wish we could all have it and all have our parents or our, whoever it is that you're lost. So how do you help somebody, as far as a grief and loss specialist? What's your advice on that jealousy
So I
piece?
think it's a really good question, a real honest question, and I'm glad that it was raised because I will say that feelings aren't right or wrong. They
Mhm.
just are. And of course, we may feel like we shouldn't feel that because it's a negative feeling to say that you're jealous. Well, I have spoken about whether it's grief or is it things like jealousy, envy. Sometimes there's a host of different reactions that people can have around the grief process. And I think that it is a normal reaction to what is jealousy? What is envy? It's the desire to possess something someone else has or the desire to have it and you're missing it. So it's not that that it's wrong to feel that way. It's what you do. How do you navigate that feeling? What do you do with that
Yes.
feeling? So I work with a lot of women who've had perinatal loss, stillbirth, and miscarriage, and they constantly tell me they can't turn on the TV. They can't stand watching people, walking with their baby carriages, and I say,
Yeah.
I would imagine that's awful. It's very difficult. Or what you had mentioned about seeing other people with their moms. And Mother's Day is brutal. So of
Yeah.
course you can have that feeling, and it actually hurts me. It hurts my heart to hear that people will dismiss that someone has that kind of feeling because it's not polite. What is it? Not ladylike? Is not okay? Well, but why wouldn't you feel like that? You're
Yeah.
missing something. Doesn't mean that you want harm for somebody else. You just miss it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So what advice, when someone says like I can't watch the show or I can't do this, how can you work through that jealousy? Is there some kind of like concrete exercise to help with that, or do you actually just have to? For me it was just acknowledging it and going, okay,
Yeah.
this is what's happening.
Yes, and
Here I am.
exactly. Instead of dismissing it, own it, lean into it, and let's talk about it, and then you work through it. But most importantly, to normalize it and meet with other people who can acknowledge and validate that this is something that makes sense as part of your grieving process. So you don't feel like you're going crazy or you're wrong or you're a bad person for
Yeah.
having these feelings. And your question about, well, what do we do with it? I get I it sometimes I'll hear, "Well, is it selfish of me not to wanna go to that Mother's Day thing or not to wanna go to that birthday party, that kid's birthday party because I just, had a miscarriage?" And I'll say, "You do you. It's not selfish. It's taking care of yourself." And if right now, if people don't understand that you can't go to that mother-daughter luncheon right now, is it gonna be forever? I don't know.
Mhm.
But right now, firsts are difficult, but some people have a lot it takes longer than a first, so I'm not gonna put a time limit on it, but it's validating, acknowledging, and doing what feels right for you. My philosophy, as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or dangerous, do it. because according to somebody, you're doing it wrong.
That's true.
So
Yep.
you might as well do what you want to do. As long as it's not illegal, immoral, or dangerous. And sometimes I throw in, and it'll grow back.
Yeah. Chop off your hair. I did that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to get through some of these. Hi, Tony and Debbie and Becky and everybody. If I don't say your name, I promise we will get through all of these. But I know somebody asked, I think it was Pat, but it's hard to scroll through all of these. But she asked about the shock, like the shock of the loss. And how do when, I think it was, when does that fade? Or, oh, sorry, it was Patty. She said, when does the shock go away? It's been less than 10 months. I lost my husband of 31 years. Well, oh my goodness.
So Patty?
Yes, Patty. Mhm.
My sympathies. 31 years, 10 months. Sometimes we feel like that's the rush, that we have to rush this grief because we don't want to feel like that. Who wants to feel like the pain? Ugh, who wants pain? If I tell you don't touch the stove, you're going to hurt you. You're not going to do it because you don't want to feel pain. Of course we don't want to, but how could you not feel that pain? And I say pain is inevitable, but suffering is not. You don't have to suffer, which means going out and getting or finding some support.
Yeah.
So the shock in some ways, and this is why we get very caught up in the grief theories that come out and are misused and misunderstood. But we're a society that likes tick boxes. So if I look at the famous Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and I say, okay, for shock and denial, and then I'm angry, and then I'm bargaining. Well, it was never meant for grief, for
Yep.
death. It was meant for the dying process. But then it was like, oh, this is cool. We're going to take this theory and we're going to put it towards, because it looks a lot like many people feel. The emotions in of the theories are true, but it's not that nice, neat, simple. It's, as you all know, it's much more complex. So the shock, you can have it and feel it, and it can last years. And then you can feel angry, and then you can feel shock again. Because I still look 33. It's 33 years since my brother died. Sometimes I still say, I can't believe it. I can't believe what happened. But then I go back to sadness and anger, because we come in and out of all of these emotions as we evolve and we develop. So,
But you know what? I love what you did. And it's so simple. You literally said 31 years and 10 months.
Yeah.
Like, look at that scale.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I think that would help, just to do it for yourself, to look at you and go, okay, I had my mom for 35 years and I've lived 4 without her. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Or when somebody says, like, why aren't you over it? It's been a year. It's been 2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have, just that scale. Like, just think about that, because, so often, oh my gosh, there's no way you would be over it, or even through anything. You're just a mix of all this mess that you've been left with, and the beauty and the love too. But oh my gosh, I just love when you did that. It made it so visual for me as a teacher. And so I hope people do that.
People, when they call me, I'll get a phone call. You need to see my mother. Why do I need to see her? Because my father died, and she's crying. I'm like, okay, and I'm like, what would you exactly like me to do? I say I'm a social worker, not a magician.
Right.
No, but I will. What? And they'll say, they'll say, well, why? Why are you so concerned? Well, because she's crying, and I'll be like, okay, well, first of all, what should she be doing? And
Yep.
secondly, like, how long has it been? And I'll say, well, how long were your parents married? And they'll say 30, 40, 50. And how long has it been? 2 months. And then I'll do this with them,
Yes.
help them just put it in perspective, and then say, what should they be doing? Because I know that it is very hard to watch somebody you love in pain.
Mhm.
It's brutal. But like I keep saying, pain is inevitable. The stronger the love, the more pain.
Yep.
You could not have pain. If somebody you have no feelings for dies, you're not gonna feel it. But
Right.
it's a package deal.
Yes, that's exactly right. It is a package deal. Um, I know that, hey, Gary's on here.
Hi, Gary.
So we have to say a huge shout out to Gary
Gary.
of Surviving Grief, because actually when I interviewed Gary on my Grief and Goodbye series, he said, hey, I have a friend, Corey, and I think you guys would just be great together. And I was like, yes, let me see her work. And so I immediately started watching her TED Talk. And then I read, like I said, I read her book in 2 days. And so, hey, Gary, because this would not have been possible without him. So
That's right. Thank you.
and somebody also asked about like grief and the fog, kind of, that fog.
Yes, that's right.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I think it is, again, I feel like I'm a broken record because I keep saying, but I think we need to normalize a lot of these things.
And I'm listening. I'm just trying to make sure we hit all these comments. So keep going.
So I think that because we're it's awkward and uncomfortable for people, we tend to worry about how are we doing it? How am I doing? How am I doing my grief? How am I? I will say that it takes a good year to process every holiday, birthday, anniversary, season. And so you're just acclimatizing yourself or getting accustomed to this quote unquote new normal. And when it comes to that fog, the reality of the loss, the intensity of the loss, it's an ongoing process. It develops, and it I guess I don't know what word I want to use. It morphs, and so much. And there was a great article I read recently about somebody studying, interviewing people from a family of someone who died in 9/11. And so it's 20 years later. And what was so wonderful about the article, there were a lot of really good pieces to it, but one of the things that stuck with me is how this author demonstrated how people's grief had changed. So the fog does lift, the reality sets in, and when the reality sets in, I think we go into autopilot initially when somebody dies, just so we can function, just so we can get through the funeral and just whatever kind of memorials you're doing. And so I call it about 3 months later, I say when the casseroles stop coming. Because then people say, okay, we were supportive, we were there, we came, we called, and they should be fine now. So they leave, and then the reality sets in. So that fog may dissipate at that point, and the pain sets in.
The hard work comes. Yeah, that's when the hard work comes. I know there's a common theme tonight, and I think a lot of people are having questions around a significant other, a spouse, a husband that has passed away. And so what advice or kind of, things would you give to somebody that's, my loss is my mother. So that's a completely different loss. And so what kind of things do you use or tell people who have lost their significant other? Because that's such a, huge change in lifestyle and life and love and everything.
So I don't compare grief.
Right.
Everybody's grief, theirs is their own. I had a woman who said, today at the funeral home, you're burying a 23-year-old, and my husband was 87 and we had a full life together. But if you and I are both wearing tight shoes, your pain is your pain and my pain is my pain.
Yes.
And so I look at more what is the relationship and what is the meaning of that relationship as part of how someone can do their grief. And I know it was very interesting. I stopped my publication of my book to make sure that this line went in it. And it was what one of the widows I worked with said. She said, I always have someone to do something with. I just have no one to do nothing with.
Oh, yeah.
And that to me is widowedness in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's the difference between.
Yeah, say it again, because I know people are like trying to write this down.
Yeah.
So yeah, say it again.
I always have someone to do something with. I just don't have someone to do nothing with.
Yeah. And if you forget it, it's in the book.
Yeah. And and one of the other women that I work with said to me, when my dad died, my mom said to me, I'm lonely. And she said, how could you be lonely? You have me. And she said, you don't understand. She said, and then she got older and she had her kids and her family, and her husband died. And she said to her kids, I'm lonely. And her kids went, how could you be lonely? And she says, now I understand.
Oh,
Very different. And I'll give you one more. One of the women in the group I work with said to me, or said to the group, I I hate to get my hair done. And everyone was like, why? And
I
she said,
remember
well,
this one.
she says, I have no one when I come home to say I look nice.
Mhm.
And most people, when you would say that to them, would say, duh, just call me. I'll tell you look good. And all the women in the group went, oh,
Yep.
it's loneliness. It's a different kind of loneliness. That's what I hear from someone who is a widow or widower.
Yeah. And I love that in the book that story's in there.
Mhm.
And another thing is that the book is you give so many examples about people that have lost parents, people that are widows and have lost spouses, people that have lost children. And I really loved that because, like you said, grief is so unique and you cannot compare it, even if it's a with both, you're in a widow group for
Right.
people, everybody's experience is so completely different. And I love that you use the storytelling of people that you've worked with, because those are the stories that really stay with you and they help you understand. You can never truly understand, but they do help you go, oh, yeah, because when I was reading that in the book, it made me think, like she said, she went and got her hair done and her husband
Mhm.
would always tell her, and it reminded me, it wasn't just that she wanted somebody, it was that she wanted the way he did, the way he looked at
Yeah.
her and said, I love it, it looks
Yeah.
cute. And it made me think of my mom, like when I would dress up or when
Yeah.
I would do something, and the way my mom would look at me, and I knew she like felt I was pretty and that she loved me so much, just how a mother can look at you. And that's something I miss, and my husband tells me all the time, but there's just something so different the way a mom looks at you.
That's right. Yeah.
And so just like, everybody, there's just those things that you miss so desperately because it's, them and your person.
That's right.
So, yeah. So Amy said, thank you so much for doing this. Um, Patty said the silence is so loud. So, um, thank you, Betsy. All these people are commenting. So Tony and all these people. And I do want to remind you guys that sometimes comments and questions don't always show up. So we will make sure, both Corey and I will go back in after this is over and make sure we have addressed everything in the next day. We definitely will not leave you hanging if you have asked us a question we just didn't happen to see. But Patty, I want to talk about that because she says the silence is so loud. And I have to agree, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. But silence is really, nighttime for me was the hardest.
Yeah.
I know I've talked about this with a lot of different guests, but nighttime really forced me to, I did the distraction thing. I had never seen an episode of The Office when my mother passed away. I have now seen all of them.
Okay.
She passed in 2017. I just started watching it because nighttime was so hard for me. And I finally had to go, okay, what is it? Well, it was the quiet. It was the still, And so I had to learn and really kind of evaluate what was it, why the silence, why the still. And I honestly had to get to a point where I was like, okay, it's not gonna stop. Like there's always gonna be night. There's always gonna be quiet.
Yes.
So how do you help people? I know for me, it was just a process and really evaluating my own needs and emotion. But what is something that you say to those people that say, the silence or nighttime or those
Yeah.
things?
They say the silence is deafening, right? I love
Yes.
silence. As a therapist, silence is a tool that we use to help us reflect. And when a big emotion is felt, we need to take a breath and take a moment. But yeah, it can be uncomfortable. And especially when you're alone, it can be deafening, no doubt about it. What happens when we are not preoccupied with so much other things going on in that quiet? We become our very own best therapists.
Yeah.
And we go then, and there we are off to the races. So
Yeah.
yeah, a distraction is good, but owning it and learning how to embrace the silence as a time to reflect. Sometimes someone will say, well, I was in the car every 5 o'clock every day. That's when I spoke to my mother. I called her in the car, and now 5 o'clock in the car, it's too silent. But you can be thinking about conversations you had. You can be reflecting and reviewing and remembering.
Oh,
things about
that's
the
beautiful.
person.
Yeah, that's such good advice because I was kind of the same way with my mom. I would always call her on the way to my daughter's dance. Like we had a 45-minute commute,
Yeah,
so it's what we did. And I found that time was so anxious. And my husband said, "Just call me." I'm like, "No, I don't
it's
want to
not
call you.
no.
I can't call you. I don't want to have anything to say to
That
you."
that's a beautiful example, and he's a sweetheart for saying it. If we wanna fix it.
Yep. Yes. And you're right though. I wish I would have, I don't even know what I did. Now my daughter doesn't do dance anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't have to worry about it. But I wish I would have thought, okay, I can't call her. So let me think back to the times when I did call her and what she would say. And that's just beautiful. And it seems so simple, but something I never thought of before. So we have went way over. I'm so
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
So but I do not want to leave without, we've had a couple questions about this, and I know your TED Talk talks about this, and I will put the link for your TED Talk in here also, but let's end with just some coping mechanisms of, we're in grief, we're grieving, it's a journey, we're going through it. So what are some things, some coping mechanisms that we can use to, to assist in this journey?
So there are a number of them, and just like there's a number of different personalities and needs, so everything from finding ways to honor the memory of the person, and I'll put that on hold and go talking about them. Finding if people that cannot talk about them, then find people who can talk about them, and whether that's a support group, a therapist, and there's lots of online. Gary's his Facebook page is brilliant, and
Yes.
as is his book. Thank you for doing this. So finding somewhere where you can park yourself and without being judged, a safe place where you can express yourself.
Yes.
So finding that some people turn to religion. Unfortunately, some people turn away from religion. So whatever works for you that way. Finding something in a community that feels good for you. I love to say find ways and things that make you laugh. And I know that sometimes people just like, really? That's what you're going for? The laugh? Like I just don't feel that. And I get that, but laughter is a great, great coping mechanism, and it's a big, wonderful stress relief, which is why you saw some of what we were doing tonight and my smiles, because I do, someone who works in this field so much, I like to laugh. I cry a lot, but I look for opportunities to laugh.
Yes.
Um, find recognize and create your own rituals around holiday celebrations. I think we were talking off air about that just because you did traditions the way you did them before, if you want to continue them, but nobody's saying you have. Well, people might be saying it. I'm saying, Tori is saying,
Yes.
you don't have to continue a tradition, or maybe just this year you're not ready, it's too much to do the tradition. When you go somewhere, because now you're not making Christmas dinner and you're someone else is going, because I've said you might want to consider not doing following the tradition because it's too much, have an escape plan. Just because you're going somewhere and people want you to go, and you might want to, if it's too much, make sure you have a way to leave, a polite way of leaving. So if you either, that's kind of a hybrid between not going at all and going and being kind of stuck there. So finding a
Yep.
place that you have that escape plan. Create your own traditions, new traditions. Wear the clothes, like wear a favorite sweater of the person, make a toast to that person, set a place setting for that person, make the favorite food that person like. I'm talking about kinds of things to do around the holidays and ways
Yeah.
to cope with the holidays. I actually have, if people email me, I have a Grievers Bill of Rights and a Grievers Holidays Bill of Rights, just some suggestions around how to manage that. And but I think I wanted to end with on ways of honoring the memory of the person. And there are so many ways that you can honor someone's memory. And some of them are things like speaking their name
Mhm.
and lighting a candle and going to the cemetery, or I've had clients that have bought benches at cemeteries so that it's not only do they benefit, but other people do. Creating foundation in their name, volunteering at the place that they like volunteering at, or becoming a volunteer, or donating to a cause that they like. I don't want to only attach it to money, though. It doesn't always have
Right.
to be a monetary thing. So it could be by writing, drawing. I mentioned already different kinds of support group and support services that I know they're available, and they're certainly available online. Now everything has gone virtual. And I know something that I did is that 30 years after my brother died, someone challenged me to doing something, and I wasn't sure I would do it. And then I said, okay, I'll try. And I wrote a blog. It's actually on my website, and it's called 30 Years Later, 30 Reasons Why. And I wrote about um, 30 things that I remembered about him. And then I posted it on Facebook. And the most incredible thing happened. The people that knew him were commenting like nobody's business, and they were so happy to see this and have that place. I didn't anticipate the reaction that they would have this place to also say, "Hey, yeah, and I remember that." I know. And then the people that didn't know him were also very grateful that I had written all this, because they're like, "Oh, no, now I know a little bit more about your brother I didn't know." And so it was just such a wonderful experience. So we think we sometimes we think we need to hide it, we need to be quiet, we need to like not make too many waves. And no, I think people want to know. They want to know more about the person. And if those that are interested will ask, and those that won't, they don't have to. And if you feel like you don't have people that you can, I call them feel good people. If you don't have
Mhm.
people that you can talk, then find people that you can, because I know they're out there.
Yes. Yes, and I said that today. I wrote a piece on, just say their name, tell me your favorite memories about my mom. Bring her up, don't be afraid, because a lot of times people are afraid. They think it's going to make you extra sad. You're
Yes.
like, I'm already carrying this sadness. You can't make me
That's right.
extra sad by saying her name. And it's so beautiful, like you said, because a beautiful, beautiful woman from my hometown just recently lost her mother, and she shared it on her page, and she said, yes, she said, say my mom's name, tell me those memories.
Yes.
And people started writing memories of her mother that I didn't know,
Yeah.
and that reminded her of all these beautiful things that her mom had done that she probably just hadn't
Mhm.
thought about recently. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing, especially with as big as social media is nowadays. you know Post something that just says, "Tell me your favorite memory of my mom or
Yes,
my brother or my husband,"
so great.
because you're exactly right. The people that are there, that are your feel good people that know them and love them, they're going to want to share those memories. And then you have all of those to look back on, or maybe even say, this might even be something I do just like through the month of November, and say, show me a picture of your favorite memory of your person,
Perfect.
tell me your favorite
Perfect.
story. Yes,
I
I
love it.
love this. This is
I love
good.
it. It's a great thing to do, and it's very cathartic. Someone recent, well, yeah, about a year ago, sent me a picture of my brother that I never saw,
Ah.
and it's a stunning picture. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I was
You need
so
to share it in the
happy.
comments if you
I
can.
was
That
so
would
happy that she sent this picture to me, and so I thanked her, and I posted it, and again, it was one of those things that I wanted to demonstrate that it's always welcome, or always, I believe it's always. I was so grateful that because she went, "Ugh, should I send it? Shouldn't I send it?"
ah,
Why? Exactly what you said. Afraid that it would be too hard, it would hurt. Do you ever not want your special person to be recognized and
yeah,
acknowledged?
absolutely. You can never have enough
Yeah.
pictures. Like,
Yeah.
please, if anybody's watching this and you have pictures of my family, of somebody else's family,
Yeah.
send
Yeah.
them, because
Yeah.
we're digging for them.
Yeah.
I've found that now, it's 4 years in, I've
Yeah.
seen them all now. Of what I
Mhm.
have, I've seen them, and I don't have any new ones. And so that would be such a beautiful gift, and it's so simple because people have them. Somebody somewhere has a picture of your husband or your nephew
Yes.
or your brother
Yeah.
or whoever it is that you lost. And yes, that's such a beautiful thing. And I think that's just so uplifting to end on too, is just, how we can, honor our grief, how you can honor the grief of other people, and just in this community of beautiful, souls that are grieving, awesome and special people that, we take these next couple of months to use this page because it is a safe space to share those stories and those pictures. So I just absolutely love that. And it seems like such a simple thing, which oftentimes it's the most simple advice that you get that really changes your life.
It's right there. It's right there,
Yeah.
And also, I would say, be the things you love most about the person who died.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. I could just talk to you forever. I just appreciate your time.
Make it very easy. So
Oh
thanks.
my gosh. Thank you so much for your time, your work, your book. Like I said, everybody, the link to purchase her book, the link to her website, all of Corey's social media and how to reach her will be in this comment section. And I just want to thank everybody for watching this.
Thank
If
you.
you have a question, Corey and I will be checking back in the next day on this comment section. So if you have anything that you want to ask us to say, please do it and we will make sure to respond to you. If not tonight, within the next day, like I said. And just thank you all for being here. Thank you, Corey, and keep doing this amazing work. I appreciate it. Bye, everybody.